And hello, everyone. My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. And for those of you who may not be aware, the festival is now in its 21st year. And we were all ready to do all kind of live events in the spring. And then the pandemic happened and we moved everything online very quickly and then added so many more events. So we have been running a lot of special talks online, and we'll also continue that later this week and the next week. So check us out at woodstockfilmfestival.org. But this is a very special conversation. I was waiting for that eagerly ever since I was able to confirm it. So I'd like to welcome Maria Schrader, who is the director of one of my favorite television shows on Netflix, Unorthodox. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much, Meira. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for joining us in Berlin. Maria, for those of you who don't know, is a very accomplished actress and also a very accomplished director. She has done just a few years ago in a film I just watched with a colleague, Stefan Zweig, for World to Europe, which is an amazing film. I urge you guys to watch it. And AIMÉE JAGUAR years ago, which is another incredible film. Giraffe, beautiful film. So Maria is very accomplished, and she's also right now in pre-production for another film. So I'm so glad that she had time to join us. Maria, so now it's late in Berlin. What is it, after 9 o'clock?
I wouldn't consider it late. Yeah, okay. Just 9. I'm a night owl, so the evening just got started.
Okay, spoken like a true European. For those of you who are not familiar with how we do it, I'm going to chat with Maria a little bit, and then I invite you all to please use the Q&A portion in a Zoom and write in your questions, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. So Maria, Unorthodox is, I find that to be a very complex show, so many layers, and it's sort of hard to even sometimes to know what point of view it's taking, and because it's just so layered. And I think that everybody there is conflicted, especially the main character, who I think is most amazing actress. Shira Haas is incredible. So young and so incredible. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about dealing with a subject that is, I find to be very complex. And I wonder if you see it that way, and if so, how did you deal with getting, to reaching all these different layers of it and still delivering them to us, which is tricky.
Yes, our main character, Esti, she grows up in a specific community and a specific world, which is probably foreign to most of us. And it's a community of people who try to stay away from the rest of the world. And of course, I think it arouses curiosity. And at the same time, it's a little unsettling also for us as filmmakers to approach this community, because they obviously don't want to be in the center of attention. They don't want to be in the public eye. They definitely don't want cameras on their sideways. So there is, I think, the balance between acknowledgement that this is a very specific world, a very specific way of life the Satmar Jews are leading, and so we tried to approach with curiosity and with respect. And of course, most of it, what we shot, wasn't shot in their community, and we tried to not violate in any ways. And so we recreated most of the specifics of this community. And at the same time, we looked at the story, of course, as something which can also be translated into other circumstances. You know, it's a story about a young person who all of a sudden feels she doesn't fit any longer, and there's a lot of social pressure on her shoulder, and she comes to a point where she decides to leave everything what she knows so far, the only world she knows. And I think that conflict can be put into, you know, other parts of the world, other religious surroundings, and even not non-religious surroundings. So there is a very universal aspect of it, and every conflict. And now coming back to your question about the complexity, every conflict in this particular story, I would assume, comes from, you know, a different view onto the world. No one in the story is evil. No one wants to treat someone else in a bad way. Every character tries to, you know, act in the best way they think. So if they come after Asti, for instance, it's not to threaten her, it's to save her. So in the moment you understand the specific mindset of each character, then it naturally becomes a complex picture. And I find it generally more interesting for storytelling to understand motives and to have various perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to delve back a little bit and ask you also about the genesis of that particular series. How it came to you, what pulled you, you know, what moved you about it, how did it arrive to you, and what made you decide to take it on? It's your first series that you directed with Netflix. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
So my personal genesis of how to get to this project started with another serial project, which is called Deutschland 83 and Deutschland 86. I was an actress in that one, and this is how I met the showrunner of Unorthodox, called Anna Winger. And she was already the showrunner of this other series, Deutschland 83, which is set in the Cold War between the two parts of Germany, you know, a spy thriller between East and Western Germany. And we met and we started a conversation which maybe went a little beyond the regular conversation of a showrunner and an actress, because she knew I was writing. I was also a filmmaker, and we found out that we like having conversations about scenes, about character, and then she saw the opening night of the movie you've just mentioned, Stefan Zweig, Farewell to Europe, and she really liked it. And from that moment on, we decided to find a project for us together in this new constellation, me being the director and her being the head writer and showrunner. And she actually developed something also set in Berlin. It was in the first stage. It was a small treatment, and it already dealt with German Jewish issues. But then at one day, she came to me with the book Unorthodox, the memoir written by Deborah Feldman. For those who might not know, the show is based on the book of Deborah Feldman of the same name. And she, 15 years ago, meanwhile, I think it's 15 years ago, no, it's 12 years ago, I think, that she left Williamsburg, that particular community, and now lives in Berlin. And Anna and Deborah, their children share a school.
Huh.
So Deborah actually approached Anna on, I think, on the schoolyard, and had seen Deutschland, and and you know, started the conversation if Anna wouldn't be interested to have a look at Unorthodox and maybe turn this into a series. And so Anna came to me, then the three of us met in a very early stage. Then Anna introduced me to the second creator, Alexa Karolinski, who is a Los Angeles-based documentary filmmaker, also Jewish, and she worked in the field of Jewish life in Berlin because she also has family here. She knows the Jewish community in Berlin very well. She is bilingual. And that then built the central creative team. Anna and Alexa as the writers and creators, and me as the director. And Deborah herself wasn't involved in the making of the show. She wasn't involved in the scripts. And for those who are interested in that, the script actually is very truthful to Deborah's description of her bringing up and her life in Williamsburg, and also the family characters. From the moment on our character arrives in Berlin, it really is a fictional piece of work. It has not much to do with the real life of real Deborah. Anyway.
I'm going to then, there's a question here from Francine Zuckerman, and you mostly answered her question. She's just asking what was the process like working with Deborah Feldman, which you talked about. My extension to that question is, since you have changed so much and taken creative freedom with the story once it came to Berlin, how has Deborah seen it? And I'm sure she has. And what was her reaction?
Yes, as I said, Deborah wasn't involved in the process of writing the scripts. She was aware that that we will take a different path. And I think also out of the various reasons, we implemented the music because it's such a, it's visual, it's sensual, instead of, you know, literature, which is rather Deborah's field of work and destiny. And also Deborah's story went differently. You know, she first left the community, then she started studying in the States. Her child was born in the States, and only when I think her son was 3 years old, she went to Berlin. So yeah, we kind of had to condense the story a little bit. It's also, for a fictional work, it's more interesting if a character, if Esti leaves her world and really throws herself into something unknown and not step by step, you know, gets to know it like Deborah did. And so she was aware. And then when we started shooting, she was visiting us on set, and she also brought her son, who is now 14 years old. And I think her first visit was right in the first week of shooting, and we started with the apartment of the young couple when they're married, when they this small housing project apartment, which we built in a studio here in Berlin. And so obviously we started with the most intimate and most difficult scenes between the young couple. So this is where she first visited with her son, and obviously she liked it a lot. She was curious, she was very supportive. And then the other set visit was at the wedding. Of course, everyone wanted to be part of the wedding because it was this big event with so many people. And I think that was rather overwhelming for her because we had, I don't know, more than 200, 250 dressed extras. And also, you know, in the breaks and in the lunch breaks, it almost felt like Berlin turned into a Williamsburg.
Yes, sure. Thank you. I have a question here from a mutual colleague of ours, Sabine Hoffman, editor.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And
Sabine.
she has a little statement and then a question, and Sabine says, a long-time admirer of your amazing work, both as director and actor. And she watched the Stefan Zweig film recently and was very moved how it resonates so deeply today. It has a very current situation of, and she's asking, has the current situation affected your thinking in regard to artistic freedom and responsibility? And there's additional question to that, and she says, how does, and that's a very interesting question I find, how does your work as an actor influence and benefit your work as a director? And what part of the filmmaking process do you treasure the most? So this is a three-part question.
Okay, I try to keep my answers short. Of course, it's very interesting questions, and I could talk about all of that for hours, as you can imagine. The first question, the current situation, I think, Sabine, you're referring to the subject of Stefan Zweig, Farewell to Europe. It came out 2016, shortly after the whole refugee issue was so relevant in Europe. But of course, we started to work on this film in 2011 already, and we shot it in 2015. But yes, it's a movie about exile. It's much more a movie about the exile Stefan Zweig than the writer Stefan Zweig, because in the last 5 years of his life he was more or less homeless and traveled the world and South America, and he was considered to be the big European, and by then already, when we started the project, we thought these are very relevant questions also today. What does it mean being in exile? What does it mean surviving? What does it mean losing your own language? Is there a possibility to install a home? So this was the whole field of these questions made us proceed with a historic story of Stefan Zweig. And then, yes, it hit us all unexpectedly how much the movie then mirrored and echoed the current situation, which brought it onto the front pages of European newspapers, because we were referring to a time when Europe was the place to flee, you know, and Stefan Zweig took all the effort to help his friends leave this continent, which was ruled by terror. And it's only 75 years after that Europe turns into the place of hope for so many people. So it's kind of reflecting to what Europe had to deal in this time with all these people trying to come here. And we shouldn't forget that it's not long ago that, you know, there were other places taking in refugees from Europe. So yes. Second question was how my acting experiences influence my directing work. I think they do. I think I mean I call myself very lucky to be able to switch, and after directing Stefan Zweig, for instance, I went again in front of the camera as an actress, and in that particular moment, I'm very happy to not have all the responsibility on my shoulders and give it to someone else. And I think I turned into a very cooperative partner as an actress, because I know the other side, and I anticipate that there are other problems than the actors' problems on set sometimes, and I try to make directors' lives easy. And in the opposite direction, I think that first of all, I am very trained as an actress to create emotional connection, and And I think this is maybe also a something which I look for as a director. And I also think I know actors very well. I think I have a good sense of which actor needs in specific moments. You know, actors are so different. Some of them really love to talk about everything. Some of them love to do rehearsals over and over. Some of them rather spare their craft for the moment the camera is on. So I think I sense what each person on set might need, and I'm trying to fulfill these needs. I think I know how an actor feels on set, and try to make life also easy for actors. And I mean easy in the term of not being afraid. I don't really believe in terror on set. I don't really believe in a huge hierarchy, or, you know, in intimidation. I mean, I've worked with directors who really play their power, and I don't really think that you get the best work out of that. I think it's a director's responsibility to spread trust and courage, and also some kind of atmosphere, not only amongst the people in front of the camera, but also within the whole team. I'm responsible for concentration, for atmosphere, and for a field of work which is protected and valued, and where people are also invited to try things out and maybe fail, but maybe not.
Sounds like you're a joy to work with and for, and it really does all stem from the director. The director sets the tone for the rest of those on set, not just the actors, but everyone who works on set, from the grips to the PAs to the producer.
Yes.
So, thank you for making their life joy.
Well, maybe they take the opposite. I'm not sure. If you ask the actors, maybe they, no, I hope not, but maybe.
Well, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding, because your work is really remarkable. So what you're doing clearly works. I'm going to get back to questions from the attendees, and I'm seeing here 2 questions that I can combine into 2. And one of them is by Jean Fisher, and the other is by Frederica Taylor. And together they are asking about the community of the Orthodox community. And one is that you said that most of the film was shot outside of the community, but parts were in there. And how did you do it? Did you have to get permissions? Were the actors former members of the Orthodox community? And the other part of that question, which is by somebody else, is have you ever spent time in these communities, specifically in Williamsburg? So
yes,
you can take that.
Yes, so maybe I start with the second question. I was, for the first time, I visited the community already in the year of '89. I by then was also on a research trip, and we've spent a lot of days. I think I was almost 3 weeks in Borough Park, Lee Avenue, which was very different by then. It was for the project you mentioned called The Giraffe, and Sabine Hoffman, who was posing this other question, was the editor on that, so she knows what I'm talking about. It's also set in quite a religious setting in New York, not as religious, not ultra-Orthodox, but we wanted to understand a little bit and to get to know this area. And also for Unorthodox, we traveled twice to Williamsburg, and we also met people and we spoke a lot to people. And yes, we did have collaborators, and very, very important collaborators who grew up in that community, who knew it by heart, who were raised with Yiddish as a mother tongue. One of the most important figures was Eli Rosen. He is playing the rabbi, and he comes from that community. He married in the community, he left it, and then he turned to be an actor, and he was also our supervisor, who gave us access to private homes. We talked to people who are still living in the community, and he kind of supervised all the details. He was on my side the whole shoot. And then we have various actors in smaller parts who come from the Satmar community, obviously left the community. And then, for instance, one of our main actors, Jeff Wilbush, who plays Moishe. You know, he is a Berlin-based actor, and I was with him on stage a couple of years ago in the theater, and I knew he came from Israel, and I knew he was very familiar with prayers. I asked him to be a supervisor on the Stefan Zweig. I did not know that he grew up in the Satmar community in Jerusalem, in Mea Shearim. So when he knew about this project here in Berlin, he said, "This is my story." And yeah, so I found it very, very reassuring and important also for my work to have people around me who were real connoisseurs and who made sure that what we do in front of the camera is authentic.
Thank you. Mark Friedman is asking something that very much relates to what you just spoke about. And he's asking, did you have someone who served as an intermediary with Hasidic community to help keep things authentic, accurate? And you addressed that, but perhaps you can expand upon it.
Yes, that was definitely Eli Rosen. He's an actor. He plays at the Jewish Rep Theater, and I remember very well the first night we arrived from Berlin to New York, and it was a very small group of people. It was just the producer, Alexa as the creator. It was the production designer, costume designer, and I went to see a show at Jewish Rep Theater, and Eli was playing together with two other actors who ended up in our show, Waiting for Godot, in Yiddish. And of course, I was intrigued, and I immediately wanted to get to know these actors because they were brilliant. And so Eli not only helped in finding other actors from New York, so he worked with David Mandelbaum, who's playing the grandfather, the aunt of Esti, and the father we found in the Jewish, within the wonderful actors of the Jewish Rep Theater, and we did a whole day of casting. Melissa Weiss. So Eli recommended people who grew up with Yiddish or who were capable to act in Yiddish as a mother tongue. And so I was able to find within one day 6-7 brilliant actors who took on big parts in the show. But Eli also, you know, advised us with every detail. You know, it started with visiting the shops, you know, what clothes to wear on which festive day, he introduced us into routines. He also of course was involved in the development of the scripts, and said this would not happen how you described it. Or for instance, if Yankee and Moishe are looking for Esther at her grandmother's house, they would not probably enter the living room while there are only two women, you know, even if it's family. So he advised us in every detail, you know, when to look in each other's eyes, when not. And you know, all the details in the interior, but of course also how people interact with each other. Yes, yes. So he was a reassurance and an advisor.
Well, he sounded like he was a very strong and positive influence on the making of Unorthodox. I have a question here from Tiffany Simpkins, and she says, I absolutely love your show. I'm living in Brooklyn now and fairly familiar with the community. I'm curious if you or Deborah have had any negative feedback or backlash over the show from that Orthodox community.
I'm sure there's also negative there are negative reactions, and I think, for instance, Ellie, for instance, Alexa, they're very active on social media. I personally, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook. I didn't read much negative reviews in the newspapers, in the articles. I'm sure it's a twisted issue, the show, in the particular religious community, because officially, you know, they're not allowed to watch it.
Right.
And it's, yeah, they officially are not, you know, have access to internet, if not for professional reasons. But of course, I believe a lot of people are watching it, and I'm sure there is critique, and I'm sure there is also a certain fear that people might interpret things, or but I mean, it's very rare that you do something which reaches out to so many different people, which only gets positive reviews. I mean, I haven't heard from really strong and voices raised against it, which actually makes me happy. I do think that we achieved to build bridges, and
yes,
it's overwhelming, especially that the show is so successful also in Arab countries, and that we receive voices from, you know, very different religious groups, and women in, you know, from different parts of the world who emotionally connect with the story.
I have a question here from Barbara Sarah, and she's asking, was there a relationship between Deborah and Shira Haas, who plays Esti? And I just want to also expand upon that rather. Shira is an amazing, very young actress. And while you talk about the relationship, if there was any between her and Deborah, if you can also just talk a little bit about your process of working with this young actress who brings so much depth into this complex role.
Yes. So the relationship between Deborah and Shira grew. I think from the moment on they've started first contact, and of course for an actress portraying someone who's around, who's still in the world, whose story, I mean, maybe not in every detail, but it's a huge feeling. It's intimidating. It's a feeling of responsibility, and she was very eager to meet Deborah, and of course to also receive her blessing. and I think they've met before we started shooting, and I think Deborah was very, very supporting to her, and then she visited, and then after Deborah saw, you know, she saw the show even before we had the final cut. She was involved then, and we showed her the various stages, and I think she was very, very relieved. And I remember that also I met her for lunch when we finished with the editing, and because I was also very eager to get some feedback of her, and specifically about, you know, the most intimate parts of the show. It's a very sensitive subject to portray dysfunctional sex, and not to exploit, and not to, you know, and that is probably also something which gets to her still in a very personal way, because this is her story, and this is what also makes the story so specific. Because, you know, Esti's neighbors might lead a very happy marriage, you know, and even Deborah, as she says herself, would have not left the community if her marriage turned out to be much easier and happy from the first place on. So this is a very personal and specific aspect of the story. And I also was very relieved when she told me how much she finds it to be truthful and complex and respectful, and also allowing her ex-husband, our Yankee, to be a complex a character who also goes through a lot of changes, and you know, both of them at that very young age, as you say, at least to me, seem to be children in a prison. You know, they were both in some kind of pressured situation and not be able to deal with this. So this is sensitive, and I think Deborah now is really, really happy about the show. She started to raise her voice and to talk about her and the female perspective of what it means to grow up in this specific world, and how much of a home and how much of a prison it both was for her, and it turned into some kind of prison. And yes, so it is complex, and you are very right. From the moment on I saw the casting recording of Shira Haas, I personally couldn't imagine anyone else to portray Esti. And it was a very happy situation, because the creators, Anna and Alexa, felt immediately the same way. We received a lot of casting tapes from a lot of different regions. We searched in all of Europe, in the UK, in New York, but also in Tel Aviv. And Shira Haas, also Amit Rahav, who portrays Yankee. They're both Tel Aviv based, and they're both incredible actors. And you're right, I'm saying Deborah Freud. Shira brings a depth and an understanding and the capability ability of capturing so various faces and feelings at the same time.
Yes.
This was it's enormous. It's really enormous. It's enormous what an access she has to her emotional world, and what an instinct at the same time, how to balance it with intellect, with consciousness, with pride. And yeah, this is the last thing I'm saying now. Within this character, and I think this also refers to the complexity you were mentioning, there are a lot of scenes where it's a huge mix of emotions. Let's think of the scene where she gets her hair shaven, you know, right after the marriage. We talked a lot about it, and the scene is crucial, and was also crucial for Shira, because not only she had to say goodbye to her private hair, and but also this moment is filled with happy expectations, you know, it's a ritual, and she wants to fulfill this ritual, and she wants to become a happy married wife, and at the same time it's saying goodbye to her childhood. It's it's saying goodbye to an essential aspect of yours, your hair. And you'll never let it grow again as a married woman. So it's this mixture of, you know, shock and encouragement, and yes. So there were a lot of moments asking, a lot of scenes asking this kind of complex emotional state of her. And yeah, she's just brilliant, and she understood it, and she's a hard worker, and she's incredibly well prepared, and she is a very grown-up person for considering her young age. She just turned 25 yesterday.
Amazing.
Yes.
She's an amazing actress. I have a question here from Lillian LaSalle, who is a film producer, a filmmaker rather. She notes also that how wonderful it is that this is a film, I mean, a series that is completely driven by, I mean, so many women are anchoring it in front and behind the camera. And she's asking, was everything shot as it was scripted? Or was there any improvisation or changes in the script that came in during production?
Yes, it's generally we were in a rush. The moment Netflix greenlighted the project, we had an outline, or maybe even a first draft of the scripts. I don't remember it well, but the moment we started, we knew we only have a year to deliver the 4 hours. So everything kind of started at the same time, writing the scripts, finding the crew, casting, traveling to New York. And so, of course, we were able, and I find this actually very compelling and luxurious situation, that the moment you find a location, let's say the Music Academy, and you find the lobby, you can immediately adapt scenes to what you find in front of the camera, to locations, but also to actors. We changed some scenes during the making, yes. Also implementing input from the actors, ideas. Does this answer the question? Was there more? I don't remember what the question is.
I think she's really just wanted to know if there was any improvisational part in
I wouldn't say.
And you more or less addressed it.
I wouldn't say there was real improvisation in front of the camera here because we were so tight with time. But it was from the beginning, it was written to be in these various parallel narrative lines, like, you know, going back and forth between Berlin and her life before marriage and her married life. But then the structure of it, how which scene follows which scene, we played a lot around with this during the editing then. So during the editing, we kept the structure, but we changed a lot of scenes.
Was Netflix on board from the get-go, or did they? Okay, that's my question. Kathleen Weiss is asking, is there any possibility of a follow-up? And I know a number of people, not on this particular talk, have been asking that. And also she's asking, does the son in real life have any contact with his father's community?
Yes, to the second question.
Good.
Yes, I think they're in good terms, and they have a very vivid contact. And no to the first question. There will not be a sequel, at least not to my knowledge, and I'm in good contact with Anna, yet we're not planning any of it, no.
Thank you. That's too bad, but that's totally understandable. I have a question that is more just about you as a director, or as an artist. And that comes from Linda Kirkland. She's asking, do you find that there is a common thread running through your work? And if so, what is that? Is it personal to you, your work? And if so, why? So it's a little bit about how you work, where do you get your inspiration from? And if there's something that you find to be, is there a common thread to how you approach either directing and or acting?
A common thread in terms of subject, maybe.
You go ahead, sorry.
I mean, I'm quite old already, and I did not direct that many movies so far. I co-directed, I started writing while I started acting in front of the camera. My, you know, I originally come from the theater. My background is theater. I was in classical theater education, and I always wanted to be on stage. And I was, you know, at a very early age, I got to know the classic plays, and even though I stopped with the theater for 12 years in my career, I picked it on again, and I'm on stage frequently again since 2002. And for instance, I played Medea for 10 years. I just had an opening night with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I'm very familiar with a lot of plays, and so the question, what makes plays so great? What's so great about Medea? I think that I've worked so much with plays and on stage. I think I also seek for big stories. I mean, big stories in film narratives. Unorthodox, it's a very simple story, but it's a big story. It's you can do a lot of different things on this subject, you know, of what it means leaving home. In Stefan Zweig, the whole thing about exile, it arouses big questions, and I think, yes, it's a personal engagement then, because I want to be busy in my head and in research and in my creativity with subjects which I find very interesting and relevant. And when you start a project, you never know, will it really be a film one day? You know, you keep writing your scripts, and I remember so many moments where I doubted that we don't get it financed, but then I want this time I spend working on it, I want it to be worthwhile and enjoyable. And a play for Medea, for instance, you can play it 100 times and you feel the ceiling is so high. There's so much room for a story like that, and you can approach it from so many angles. And the same, and I would say it's the same with the Stefan Zweig movie. So such a big topic, and also, yes, there is an universal aspect in Unorthodox too. And so maybe that is a thread that I try to find a contemporary connection of my, you know, within my work. And I do think it's evident and necessary to make it personal, a personal enterprise. I invest myself as a person also, yes, as an actress and also as a director.
Thank you. I was thinking both about Stefan Zweig and Esti, and how they're both displaced by choice from their lives, and your films, your work is about their process of displacement and how they deal with it. We're approaching the end of our talk. I just want to ask you what you're working on these days, since I know that you're busy. You're very busy. Tell us.
I'm preparing something very different, but it's also dealing with quite big questions. It's a bittersweet, romantic love story set in the future between a human and a robot.
What? Okay, yeah. That's a departure from what you normally do. No?
Necessarily. It also there are big questions like, you know, what is love, and what makes us human, and are the machines better than us, and what happens if you have a partner who only exists to make you happy, and what happens if there is not a distance any longer, a difference between fantasy and reality. So what do we do without longing, without dreaming?
Sounds amazing, actually. I can't. let us know once you have made it, and we would love to see it. Maria, stay safe. I know that Germany is opening, so stay safe, stay healthy, practice social distancing. Everybody else too, please. And thank you so much for taking your time, so much time of your busy time, and talking to us. And thank you, our invisible attendees, for joining us. Loved having you. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please visit the Woodstock Film Festival website and check out our upcoming events. There's so many of them, and I'm not going to start naming them, but they're all online. So please join us. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. And Maria, have a good night, and please stay in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone present for your interest and your time. Thank you, Mira, for this beautiful talk. And please stay safe and healthy, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.